Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Happy Farm D podcast. This is your host, Alex Barker, and with me today, I have Alex Evans. It's our monthly business episode. These are some of my favorites. I really enjoy spending the time with Alex, and today we're going to be talking about something that I think holds a lot of people back, and it's things like ROI, return on investment, investing in yourself, compound effect, and just some of the things that we've invested in our businesses, what we've seen the return on, and also talk about some of the mistakes that we've made as well about investing in things that we thought would work out and the lessons that we've learned. So, Alex, thanks for hanging out with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
And if you're wondering, listener, if you're really attuned to listening, not feeling the greatest today, but we're charging ahead. So, I thought a smart way to talk about this is to first talk about the marshmallow test, which is pretty popularized. You probably have heard it. Alex hadn't, so this is a great segue. A few scientists one day wanted to study something called grit, the ability to persevere in the face of obstacles. They took a bunch of kids and they put them in a room by themselves. And in front of them, they put a very delicious looking marshmallow. And they told those kids, you can have another marshmallow if you just wait for 5 minutes, a specific amount of time. Of course, it was torturous. And of course, they recorded this to watch them squirm. Some of them crack under the pressure and they eat the marshmallow that's right in front of them. They have to have it. Others, they wait it out. They sit it out and they look at the marshmallow intently. Well, what the scientists were doing in these moments is looking at is grit innate? Do some people have it? What does it do to people over time? And what they found, obviously, in those kids that were wanting to wait, to hold off immediate pleasure in the hopes of having more pleasure later, they found that these students had positive effects in their lives later on, financially, career, business, all those sorts of things. And I think it relates to this idea of investing in yourself, the idea that I'm going to put myself through a little bit of pain, whether it is time, effort, or money investment, in the hopes that one day I will get a return on my investment. So, Alex, I think, after college, when you had put a bunch of arbitrary money that you had never seen, you had never seen the loans or the payments probably of all the money that you spent on your college investment. Did you ever think about money in the same way when investing in yourself after college?
I'm not sure that I did necessarily. I mean, I always kind of did the maxing out the 401k to the best of my ability, but it wasn't necessarily something that I was intently focused on as, oh, I have this much at 30 and I'll have this much at 40 and so on and so forth. It was just kind of more of the set it and forget it strategy. And certainly in terms with monetary investment, certainly even though I did plan for retirement, I think that investing in even after tax accounts and things of that nature certainly came later, and without a doubt investing in any sort of a business came much later after that. And I think that's one thing I now wish that I had started a little bit earlier, or even soon after graduation, with starting some sort of business and just giving it a shot, and whether it failed or not, kind of learning the lessons along the way of that.
Yeah, I feel like the investment that people have to make into a business, usually the first thing that stops people is the idea of money, right? That this is going to cost something. And most people, from what I've gathered, just interacting with people, is that, this isn't going to work out. And then the next thing I think people look at is the amount of time that they have to spend, right? Some people it's not a priority, or they don't want to think about investing in themselves because it's just like, well, that's not what I would want to do. I'd rather just, work for a company. And that's okay. Some people just pursue that path. What would you say was the first real big investment in yourself when you started this journey?
For me, I've always had an interest in starting businesses, but probably what held me back the most was having a really good idea that I thought would actually be successful. And so there's some doubt there that probably many or even most entrepreneurs have, that if this is such a great idea, why hasn't somebody done it? And then when I moved to Hawaii, you see my first real business idea was a soap company, because you see in the gift shops, the airports, everywhere you see bars of soap being sold with like a, you know, Maui lather or whatever label on it, and they were getting $6 or $8 a bar. And I thought, well, I can do this. And so I actually was making some soap up in my kitchen and testing some different recipes to start the company. So that was my first real venture into creating a company. And that one was not successful, although I would say that I didn't fully really launch the company. I stopped prior to launching it because I realized soon after making multiple test batches and things of that nature that the cost of goods was quite a bit higher than I would have anticipated, and that actually $6 or $8 was not an enormous margin for that kind of so
Sure.
and it
Sure.
didn't need much to sell it to a retailer to then turn around and sell it to a customer. So I did stop short of actually launching the business, but I looked into the cost of ingredients, the logo. I made a logo up, looked into the Rainforest Alliance certified, and kind of throughout that process, even though I never launched the business and it wasn't successful, I would say that I learned a whole lot about how you go about starting a company, whether or not it has anything to do with soap or something else.
What did you think about that investment that you put into this at the time?
I actually felt like, I think part of me was a little frustrated that that business model didn't work out, because this was prior to
Hmm.
really starting the medical writing business. I was certainly frustrated with that, and yeah, I would say it probably took time, and maybe up until starting now my website, I'm not sure that I fully appreciated how much I learned by at least attempting the soap business. I mean, certainly
Yeah.
where to get a logo and a little bit about the ins and outs of business structures. It was before I went to business school, so I learned a little bit about that. And the Rainforest Alliance certified, well, I certainly would never use it for farmcompliance.com. It is the type of thing where you have to research, is this particular branding or certification actually worth it? Like, am I going to get a return on investment out of it?
Hmm.
Outside of course, whether or not it being the right thing to do, that has it being financially feasible and a good return on investment needs to be a consideration for any business. So,
I totally agree. I think it's funny to think about money because I have this love-hate relationship when I think about investment. I love it because I almost always consider every investment I make in a business endeavor, I will likely learn something. Usually something about I'm doing wrong, or I just gain knowledge about how I would want to change a process for the future. But every time I'm faced with the decision to put forth money into something, I usually freak out.
yeah,
I usually am like,
yeah,
is this right?
that's true.
About the only time I don't think twice about a decision to put a significant amount of money into it is when I just feel really confident that this is going to turn out, and usually that only comes down to hiring people. I usually am overly confident about that. And I've made mistakes in the past. I've hired some not great people. I've hired some mediocre people, and I've hired some amazing people who work with me now. I think one of the very first investments that I made in myself was when I was a resident. So I was making $40K a year. I think my monthly take home was like $2,700 a month. And I had a car payment, had to pay rent, I had a child, my wife wasn't working. So I had all these demands, and I wanted to pay a consultant to teach me some things about business. And he charged $500 a month. um,
That takes some guts. Yeah.
I really wanted to do it because I knew that what I was going to learn from that process was going to be valuable. I knew that if I implemented the things he taught me, I would in turn create something that would make money later. And my wife took a little bit of convincing. And you probably could argue that it wasn't the best time to really start a business, but there really never is a best time.
That's
And as I got into it, I learned what I needed to learn from him. And if I track the business that I had at that time, you can actually see a growth in revenue based on the investment. I would say that I probably made my money back over the total time that I hired him as my consultant. But, at the time, you don't see that. When you're going through it, when you're making the investment, you don't see the benefits of it. Kind of just like the 401k, right? You put away 5%, 15% of your income away, and you don't really see anything happening with it. It's not till much, much later that you reap in that benefit from it. For me, I think I've invested just in myself through coaches, consultants, conferences, courses, well into the tens of thousands. And I would have to say that those things have directly contributed to my success, either directly or indirectly, I suppose, into this business. But I'll go ahead and go first with this question because it's maybe a little embarrassing to admit it, but the question I want to ask is, like, what has been the biggest disappointing investment you've made in yourself? And I'll go ahead and start. It was investing in a franchise. I thought that getting into this one franchise, I won't mention what, but I thought it was going to be very passive. My primary business was making a lot of profit. And so I thought, it would be great to use this profit and create a new system, a new business system that I could hire other people to do to, reap a much smaller profit margin than what my current business does. But I thought, why not use this money to go make more money, right? That's what most business owners do. And I got into this franchise. All total, I probably spent somewhere in the vicinity of $20,000, which is, no small amount of cash. And I got into it. I was doing the work. I was trying desperately to find someone to hire to do this work. And it just was not working out.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I salvaged the equipment and the things that I had obtained through this process, and I was able to sell off. I would not say that I made my money back at all. I probably am out maybe $7,000 from the experience. But that has been my biggest disappointing thing. And it's really because I didn't stick to what I knew. I got into a new industry completely separate from everything else that I had learned. And I learned a lot of great things, mainly about inventory management, which, by the way, is not fun to learn about. But I think I'm disappointed in it because I know what I'm great at, which I think I'm really good at teaching. I really enjoy that. I love speaking. I love talking with people. This franchise really had nothing to do with that. It was really outside of my zone of genius. And so it was, I would say, my biggest disappointment over my business career. Now, you don't have to share what yours is, Alex. I won't put you on the spotlight, but if you're willing, can you think of something that you were embarrassed about investing in?
I mean, I can certainly think of something that has not come anywhere close to yielding the results that I would have liked, considering the investment I put in it. For me, I haven't had any where there's been that much of a monetary investment, but I'm also newer to being a business owner as well. The medical writing business that I did start was in the fall of 2018, and then my website was in July of 2019. So I may be too new to have gone through those mistakes yet. We'll see. But when I was in pharmacy, the last year of pharmacy school, actually for 2 years in a row, I went down to Honduras to an island called Roatan during the summers. The first summer I was 2009, and I actually went for a dive master internship. So worked at a dive shop, filled tanks, loaded boats, scuba dove a lot. All basically just spent the time doing that for 4 weeks, and saw the conditions that a lot of people were living in. It was my first time in the developing world, seeing doxycycline being sold in a gas station a convenience store where it was 100 degrees inside with 90% humidity. And it was my first real chance to see that. So the next year I emailed the founder of a local charity there and said, is there anything I can do to help? I don't have a license in the US yet, but I'm I will have graduated from pharmacy school by the time I went. So maybe I can use some of what I've learned so far to do something to help that charity that she had founded for drug supply chain. And her biggest concern was drug stability. So it was essentially what I saw, the drugs degrading much more rapidly than the expiration date would suggest, of course, because they're not being stored at room temperature. So I set out to create a database of all known stability data on medications stored outside manufacturer recommended temperatures. So pulling data from PubMed and putting it into a standardized format where it would be searchable, which I think is ultimately could be useful. I spent hours and hours and hours working on that database with probably very little feedback from other people as to how
Mm-hmm.
format more useful for the clinics that need it, what kinds of information they need, will they use it, things of that nature. I pitched it to a few people, got a little bit of interest. I even partnered with a health sciences librarian to standardize the search strategy. And it was, I don't know how many hours. It was probably a couple hundred hours, maybe more, compiling this database. And actually, the data that I do have is available on my website for anybody to search it. I put it up there for what it's worth in case anybody could use it, but I never really developed it and demonstrated it into a format that could actually be useful for clinics. And while I would still be interested in doing that someday, I think that it really would have required, in order to be successful by this point and even earlier, I really would have needed to work with others who are experts on the ground much earlier rather than just kind of charging ahead solo to try to create the project myself, which sometimes can be my tendency. Like, I'll just take it all on myself and
Yeah.
do it, and you can be blindsided.
What is the minimum amount that I can put in to get the greatest return? Or more importantly, even thinking through how can I sell this idea before I put all the work into creating it? Internet marketers, which love them or hate them, they often think through how can we sell something to ensure that this is actually what people want. It's actually how I created Career Jumpstart, which is one of our big courses for pharmacists. I had back in 2017, I had no idea if people really wanted help with career topics and finding new jobs. I knew that everyone had the problem, but I didn't know if this was the solution people wanted. And so what I did was, instead of putting all the time and energy into creating this course, what I did is I put out the offer and I said, hey, does anyone want to take this course? I'd like to create it, but I want to make sure that people are actually interested in something like this. And I sold it at a huge discount and invited a few people to join in like a live session where I taught it live, virtually. And that's how I got our first students into the course. It's all about trying to save as much time as you can, because there are so many projects in the past that I thought were going to be shoo-ins, and I put all this time and energy into it, and money often, only to find that like no one cared. No one
Yeah.
wanted no one wanted the product. And I feel like after talking with many, I'll say, entrepreneurs in pharmacy, sometimes that's the same idea, like, oh, I think this is something that a lot of people will want. But once you get out there and start selling it, you find out, wow, no one is interested in this. I often hear that story from people who start out as health consultants. They think that everyone's going to want their services, only to find out typically the problem is they need some sales training. They need to work on their persuasive ability, which kind of comes into personal investing in yourself. I almost feel like there's a difference between learning a new skill versus putting in the money into starting a system or a business, like a franchise. Let me ask you, Alex, in this endeavor in creating your business and starting to run it, do you find it easier to invest in the business, say like building your website, or investing in yourself vis-a-vis like taking a course or hiring a consultant?
I think I tend to lean towards investing in the business, and I'm not sure that's the right answer to have that level of balance. that it's one of my New Year's resolution. Okay, so I've managed to July of 2019. I went part time at the hospital. I managed to do that because of my medical writing business. So I should have this like block of time. Of course, the writing business is going to take up significant amount of that, but I should have that where I can develop even medical writing skills. Taking medical writing courses or taking, like for example, Toastmasters is something that I've kind of been wanting to do, just to do it for even a year to become a better communicator and public speaker. But I tend to, and I will say this is a word of caution to those who are listening, who are interested in becoming a consultant or even a medical writer or other professions where you're essentially paid by the minute or paid by the hour, is it's easy to fall into the trap of, if I go to Toastmasters for an hour, it cost me $60 because I get paid $60 an hour and I could have been at home with the clock on writing. And so you want to make enough to feel comfortable, to be able to even have the money to invest in the courses to develop yourself, but also just sitting at home with the clock going whenever you're not sleeping is not really, you're better off just working full time as a pharmacist, but you've lost that balance there, and which is for many people the entire reason of going into any of those name your business, the entire reason of starting your own business. And so
Yeah.
I would say that it's been easier for me to just do more medical writing or to work on pharmcompliance.com, one or the other. And I think I need to get back towards self-development as well.
Why do you think that is? That once most people graduate, and this isn't just in pharmacy, but this is, I would say, worldwide, that once people are done with school, they don't really see the need or feel the need to continue to develop themselves.
I think I'm not sure why exactly, but I think that one thing that certainly hurts people in that is that many people, and certainly when I was in pharmacy school is when the market had started to kind of turn around to where pharmacists weren't as much demand. But you kind of see it, many people see it as you punch the clock, you're safe, you'll go into your employer, you'll work, you'll clock out, that's it, you get a paycheck. And one of the big switches in my career is when I started to view not only my own businesses, but I started to view essentially everybody I work for as a client, and view my employer where I get W-2 income as a client, and what are they looking at in the return on investment. And so it might be just a certain comfort level with, this job is going to be here for me. I can do it 20 years, 30 years. There's no sense of urgency, I guess, is maybe what I'm getting at.
The pain of having a career or job or income has been subsided, right? I would wonder if that pain has increased for people in crowded markets, right? They start thinking about things are really competitive, can't trust companies anymore. Maybe it's time, right? Maybe it's time to start taking a course, getting a certification, going back to school. I do get quite a bit of questions in that. And I often think about, I think the quote is attributed to Warren Buffett, who has said the best investment you can make is in yourself. And this is a guy who obviously has made billions from the stock market. What a lot of people don't know about him is, as he grew up, I think even like when he was younger than 10 is when he began reading books about the stock market. He's obviously put in the time and energy into developing a knowledge base and a skill set for a specific problem. And I think that is what is needed in pharmacy to help create some more innovation and more businesses, is pharmacists seeing that just having a job, working for corporate, whether you're working in the hospital, community, or even in a non-traditional job, you have to continuously provide value. Otherwise, you become obsolete. And with innovation today, what is of value is people and relationships. So knowing all these things and the problems, the huge problems that exist in our healthcare system, what are the things that we can do to innovate in this space? I think it's going to take some investment of time and money, energy. I'm not sure what is that pain point for people, but I think it happens gradually. Like, I don't think it happens overnight.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, and you kind of, in our case, you slowly see automation and changes in the law, the expansion of pharmacy technician roles, things of that nature that could put the traditional pharmacist jobs out of business, basically. And I think the key word to me that you really said is to providing value to the company, and that's for any company that you work for, whether you're an employee or whether you're a consultant or otherwise, is that you need to provide a value to that company, or your days there are limited. Either way,
Yeah.
one of the easiest ways I've always felt like, that I've mentioned even to students and others, is that there are opportunities, like you mentioned, in our healthcare system. There are plenty of opportunities of things that can be fixed. So starting even with your current employer, within working hours, you can start to look around. Are there things that I can fix? What's not working here? What could be improved upon? What could be the most efficient? And you take the initiative to take that on, whether or not your current employer notices. And I would say many of them would start to notice. You'll build skill. You'll essentially get to develop your own skills while you're at work anyway, and have some of that self-development. And then you'll have other things that you can talk about in an interview or with potential clients later as things that you did in your previous or current roles that will help you get more jobs. So I've always encouraged people to even start with what's going on at their current workplace.
Yes. I don't know the best question to ask yourself. If you're thinking about like investing in yourself, going into a program, going back to school, or taking, a class, I think the question is, with this money, with this income that you have, or whatever the cost is, 1,000, 5, 10,000, how will your life change from this? And if it doesn't work out, say the money is completely gone, what are you missing out on? I recently had the opportunity to hire someone. This is someone who is extremely qualified, who has a lot of knowledge that I would want in my business. And he was asking for essentially a really affordable rate. And so I was like, this is going to cost us a lot of money. I could see how with him doing this work, it could lead to potential revenue. But if we only do this for 6 months, let's just try 6 months, and nothing works out, then I would be out this amount of money. In the end, I'm not desperate for those things. If I lose that money, I would be fine. My family would be fine. We wouldn't lose our house. I wouldn't have to take out a loan. I wouldn't go into debt. We would be okay. So if you're thinking about investment, I would just encourage you to not only think about what are you missing out on if you don't do this, but also what is the worst case scenario? If you spend that amount of money, what's the worst possible thing that could happen? In most cases, it's usually nothing long lasting. I would say, I know we talked about some horror stories, but we also didn't talk about like all the great things that we've invested in and what we've seen from it. But I would have to say almost all of the investments I've made in myself and in people and in hiring others, it's always been a great return on investment.
Yeah, I would even add to that not only the money investment, but if you're looking at getting started at doing anything new, what's the worst case of your time investment? So 6 months from now, you say, I'm going to spend your New Year's resolution, I'm going to spend 2 hours a week trying to work towards whatever goal that is. And in this case, if for the pharmacist listening, maybe that's additional opportunities within your current workplace. Maybe it's a career change within pharmacy. Maybe it's a career change with outside of pharmacy, or some combination of those. If I spend 2 to 3 hours a week on it for the next 6 months, what exactly am I going to lose? You've lost 2 or 3 hours a week for 6 months. Is it? There are a lot more people that spend more time than that watching TV, playing on their phone. Even a long commute can burn a lot more time than that per week. So that's an even lower barrier to entry, I would say, than the money is, and some combination of time and money. But I like that idea that it's picking a time frame, maybe even the end of the year, and kind of choosing the worst case scenario for pursuing that, and understanding that there's going to be a lot of failure involved in kind of hitting your stride, so to speak.
All right. I got a great way that we can end this episode. What has been the greatest investment that you've made?
I would say that to date, the the absolute best investment I made was the time investment to really launch the medical writing business that I have. I mean, it was hours and hours and hours of sending emails and getting nowhere when you don't have much of a portfolio. I started writing for Pharmacy Times at first, so I had that. But when I really wanted to expand into doing a lot more medical writing, there was a lot of time involved in tailoring each email to the company, and I can write this piece, I can write that piece, taking pieces that maybe were underpaid for what they were, and building it up to the point where I needed to actually be able to really have a real business going. And for me, in terms of time frame, I would say it happened relatively quickly. I started in the fall of 2018, and by the summer of 2019, I was or a little earlier, spring of 2019, I was confident enough to be able to step back to a part-time role as a pharmacist. So that time frame might be somewhat short, but the hours that I put in it in between were probably what resulted in the shorter time frame. I would say, I was spending every weekend writing, and sometimes writing early in the morning or whenever I could, whether it's emails or whether it's following up with actually writing the pieces.
I would say the best investment in general has always been people. I think right now we're working with 11 contractors that work with me intimately and often. And I don't know why I chose the word intimately. That's an odd one to say, but I work a lot with these people, and I've got great relationships with them, and we often try to develop them in their own ability. And so we put them through courses to gain skills that they want to learn to make their work easier or better. And I coach quite a few of them as well, just through their performance and what they're doing. And that time and money investment has paid dividends, huge dividends. The most recent one is I recently hired an executive assistant, Sarah, and she is so fantastic. If you are an owner and you don't have an assistant, I encourage you, please make the investment and get one. The biggest benefit is that I now only check my email twice a week. Holy cow, is that amazing? So I spend about an hour every week, just going through email and answering things. That has saved me so much time. But I also get to do more work in the things that I love and the things that I'm great at. And that has made huge strides just in our bottom line. But I would say the most tangible thing that I've noticed, I've got an iPhone, and one of the things that is in the iPhone is screen time. And if you have it activated on weekly, it'll tell you how much time you spent on your screen. And since hiring my assistant, I've dropped my daily screen time by 2 hours. So that's 2 hours. I mean, granted, sure, I'm doing some frivolous things on my phone like YouTube or, social media, but that's 2 hours of my life that I'm getting back that I would say I was wasting at the time. Any final thoughts, Alex, you want to include?
I would say, just as far as investing in yourself, just get started. Just do it, whatever it is. They always say every journey begins with the first step. So if you haven't started yet, now is the time.
What a great way to end this episode. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this. I really appreciate your time. And here's to hopefully having success from you. And you know what? If this is inspiring to you or you're a business owner, we would love to talk with you. Heck, even have you on the show, maybe. Reach out to me or to anyone from my team. You can do that at alex@thehappypharmd.com. Thanks again.